a lot of this is kind of been talked about already, but effectively when you get onto the internet and radio, you've got two kind of things to worry about. Encoding the audio, and we've just been talking about that in DAB world, and then how it then reaches you via the streaming. So there's loads of ways you can do it, and we'll start with the encoding. You've got kind of two choices really. You can use software encoders, and I'm really thinking here from not from a radio station, not from a big radio group. Well, some of it is, but really from, if you want to do this small scale, you want to do it yourself. Software encoding, so programs like Winamp, which have been around donkey's years, other programs, Radio DJ, or you can use hardware encoding. With software encoding, you just need a PC. Probably it probably doesn't need to be that powerful, but you probably don't want to be doing too much stuff. Don't be editing your videos at the same time on it. And just leaving that running through, and that's doing the encoding for you in the background from wherever your studio. Or hardware encoding, which are boxes, and they can range in all sorts of price from $100 up to the sky's the limit probably. There's a couple of cheaper ones there. And I'm going to talk about a really super cheap method right at the end here, but hardware encoding, obviously, you're not really using a PC, using a box somewhere how to do it. Just been talking about codecs, AAC or MP3. Probably it's a bit more AAC these days, particularly in the streaming world, but you can stream in MP3 as well. So won't go on about that. Okay, then we get into how you actually stream, and the sky's the limit, and it really depends what you want. And this picture of a bunch of Starbucks cups from small to massive, or whatever the terminology they use, they're fake Italian. Anyway, really the sky's the limit, and it really depends who your audience is. All the way through this, and I think the whole thing today is, what's the right answer? There's no right answer. It's really dependent on what you want to do. So in terms of streaming, who's your audience? Is it you and a few mates? And it's probably, super cheap, super low. But if you're putting something out potentially tens of thousands of people are going to be listening to, then it's a bit more complicated. So what could you do? Well, probably the cheapest way of doing it is basically using someone's off-the-shelf shoutcast server. So basically there's companies out there, once you've created your stream, you've run it through maybe your software encoder, and then you point that at someone else and you pay them a bit of money, and the amount of money you pay depends really on quality, how high the quality, is it mono, stereo, bit rates and so on, and sometimes how many people are going to be listening to it, and that will depend. You could do it yourself. There's no reason you have to go to someone else. You could put a little server in, depending on your technical price, and host it yourself. Obviously, you've kind of got the issues of lots of people are listening. Is your BT or TalkTalk ADSL actually going to cope with all those people listening? But that's totally doable. Or when you're massive, you go to big, what they call CDNs, content distribution networks, Limelight, Akamai. They're the kind of companies you use. They're the people a lot of the big broadcasters use, because they've got serving capacity the world over, and basically, the broadcaster sends one copy to them, and then they replicate it, and you've kind of pushed the problem away, pay them to do it, and they handle it for you. So they're kind of the options. Things to think about then. How many people are actually going to be listening, and how many particularly simultaneously? That's kind of the key thing there. Is, you want to be able to serve to enough people, but don't overpay for it. How much bandwidth can you afford, and what quality you're streaming in? As I say, mono signal, well, it's going to be cheap, but if you want that full compression, unprocessed, full dynamic range, you're probably going to be streaming in a really high quality, the sort of thing Radio 3 does, for example, when they stream. What service level do you meet? That just means, do you care if it falls over? You pay a big company who are going to make sure that their servers are up for 99.99% or whatever. On the other hand, if you do it yourself and the machine goes over at 10 o'clock at night, no one hears anything until the first person comes in the following morning and notices the machine's gone down. So they're the kind of things. So it's all about choice, and there are loads of them. But I thought what I would do is give you an example that anyone here can try out. I know that because I said I'm not an engineer, but I've done this and it works. So this is something called the Locus Stream Sound Map, which you can go and visit. And what it is it's a network of open microphones around the world. So people have put microphones in places, often in nice rural places with lots of environment, and you click on one of those and you can play and you can listen in to nature sounds largely from around the world. And you can do this. Here is my one. What do you need to do it? You need a Raspberry Pi. There are lots of ways to do it, but this is a way of doing it. It's very cheap. Raspberry Pi, get a micro SD card and something to power it by. And then you want a sound card, which isn't a card, obviously. It's a little box. And that's just basically a USB thing to plug into your Raspberry Pi. And you'll need a microphone. And microphones, you could start with a cheap lavalier type microphone you can buy off the internet quite cheaply, or you can spend hundreds and hundreds of pounds buying something amazing. And then you probably want to set it up on the Ethernet. Use an Ethernet cable to set it up, because all the Raspberry Pis, if you've used them, you plug them into a monitor and a keyboard. Actually, you can do all this kind of thing remotely, because the great thing about this little setup is once you've got the SD card, micro SD card set up, it kind of runs itself. All the instructions are there, so make a note of that. I'll wait for these slides to come around. And that's kind of basically what it looks like. So you've got a microphone, you point it somewhere. You've got your Raspberry Pi. See, mine's nicely labeled. There's one thing engineers have taught me, it's label things. And microphone, some kind of, it could be Wi-Fi, Ethernet's probably a bit safer. And you let it go. And you can then put it out on the internet. Now, there's an interesting company organisation called Sound Tent, and every year in around May, they do a thing called International Dawn Chorus Day. And over a 48-hour window, what they do is they use a bunch of these microphones. They work out when dawn chorus is in different parts of the world. And actually, they produce a radio feed, which they then distribute to various other radio stations. And they just get the dawn chorus as it moves around the world, as the planet turns. And you can be part of it. All you've got to do is put your microphones in there and set it up, and away you go. And to give you an idea, this is, actually it's from last year because it was raining this year when I tried it, but this is recorded window out of my semi-rural flat in North London at about 4 o'clock in the morning. Processed via a Raspberry Pi. So there you go. Andy, move on now.
So once you've got your station online, you need a way for people to come and find it and be able to come and listen to it, rather than just giving them a random, long, complicated address. So naturally, the next thing you're going to come to is wanting a website for your radio station. And obviously, this is a very flash, very sophisticated website for a big radio group, providing lots of informative local information, like Shawn Mendes and Camila Cabello's relationship. But you're going to want to be able to get a good web presence, because you're going to want people to come in and find you and be able to listen to your station easily. And something that quite commonly comes up when people first think about this is, why can't I just use Twitter and Facebook as an example? Just send people to my Twitter page, send people to my Facebook page. And whilst you could do that, the problem you've always got of basing your station on someone else's platform is that you have to play by their rules. And you could wake up one day and find out that you're delisted, or that the Facebook newsfeed algorithm has changed and no one can find you anymore. And if you're putting all your effort into someone else's platform for them to be able to just pull the rug at any time, that's obviously a concern. So if you encourage people to use your website, you still go on Facebook, still go on Twitter to reach other people, but if you always direct people back to your own website, you know that you've got something that you're in control of and that people can come back to time and time again. And the first thing you're going to want to get on your station website is obviously an easy way of people being able to listen to your internet feed that you've produced. You've got lots of different options for kind of doing this. If you're fortunate enough to be on a station that's on FM and DAB and you pay your fee to Radio Player, then you effectively get a player for free. This is the console that they provide you. You can kind of put your own station logos and everything into it, but they provide the kind of code that runs that player. And if you've ever used Radio Player before, you'll know that you can search across other stations and you can kind of come and go and flick between lots of stations as well. So it's quite a nice discovery experience. Alternatively, if you're not on Radio Player, you've still got the option to build something. This is a very basic example of what a web player would look like, so that people can pop this open on a window, hit play and hear your stream, and you can put things like now playing information on it as well. So it's kind of like, how do you go about building all these things? You've got effectively 3 options for building a website for your radio station. You've got the hard way, that's effectively the cheapest way of doing it, but it's the most complicated, of coding the page entirely by yourself. Open a text editor, write the code, write the HTML, and kind of build your page. You've also got other things to consider about not just how you've written your page, but then how you're going to get it onto a server and host it. A halfway house, you've got something like WordPress. WordPress is actually two different things at the same time. WordPress, the software, provides all the code for running your website. You can put a theme onto it and it manages all your content for you, so you can just get on with actually putting the content on your website, but you still have to host it on a server and maintain it. WordPress then also has a separate option, which is a paid-for solution, which they will also host for you as well. So that's where you're starting to creep into paying for services. And then at the kind of tier below that, you've actually got companies that specialize in producing radio station websites. I've tried to put other people in there, so it's not just my own employer. But these companies specialize specifically in radio, so you can turn up, you pay your fee, but then their tools are specifically geared to you. They'll understand that you want to put a schedule on your website, that you want a player, that you want to put artist pages, etc. on there. Quite a few of these also provide streaming facilities for you. So like Adam was talking about, this server that you point your audio stream to, they will help provide it for you. And then once you've got your website set up, you've also got to think about mobile apps, because mobile engagement now is kind of eclipsing desktop usage. More people are going to be interacting with your station on a mobile phone. Do you need a mobile app? There's pros and cons to it. It's, again, going back to this whole issue of scale and also who your audience are. The big thing that's useful for mobile apps is that often if people just hear your station name and think, oh, I might want to listen to that, the default behavior will be to go to an app store and put the name in and see if there's an app there. So if that's crucial for you, then you potentially do need that presence. How do you go about building your mobile app? Well, again, you've got this sliding scale of complexity at the very difficult end, but kind of potentially lowest cost to you. Sign up for a developer account with either Apple or with Android. Writing lots of code again. Very complicated, but it can kind of get you there if you want to pick up the coding. There's then a kind of middle tier where you're still writing code, but there's a couple of projects, one called PhoneGap, another one called React Native, which allow you to use technologies that you use on your website. So if you're good at writing web pages but feel a bit overwhelmed by writing a mobile app in a different language, you can effectively build a website that you package up inside an app. And then again, you've got the kind of the tier where you can hand it all over to someone else. There are a lot of companies that will provide white label applications. You pay a fee, you give them your station logo and your information, they'll build the app for you. The thing to be quite careful of with some of these is that they will sell apps to tens of thousands of people. You've got to be very careful of the quality control on it, make sure that they get your logos right, it looks how you want it to do, it's going to be supported in the future, but it's a kind of easier option for getting in there. And the other options you've also got on mobile as well. As I said, if you're on Radio Player, you're automatically in the Radio Player app as part of that platform. And even if you don't have that, there's an app called TuneIn that's very popular. That has a large catalogue that they keep changing every so often whether they'll accept stations or not. Currently, I believe they're accepting stations again, so you can go on their website and register your stream, and then you'll appear in the TuneIn app. The obvious risk you run with both of these, again, is a little bit like your Twitter and your Facebook, more so with TuneIn than with Radio Player, that you're in someone else's platform. So at any point, if they change their model or they delist your station, then you potentially lose the ability for people to come and find you. And then I've put BBC Sounds in there just finally at the end as well, because BBC have talked about opening Sounds up further to third-party broadcasters, and I know they're in talks with people as well, so that could potentially become another viable option as well. And then the reason I've just come back quickly to the web again, this is an example of the BBC Sounds web page inside Safari on an iPhone. So just in a normal web browser, this has got all the functionality that a mobile app would have as well. You can play, you can go backwards and forwards, you can find on demand and everything. And that shows you that actually just having a really good website that works well on mobile could be good enough. You don't necessarily need to actually have a mobile app. And one of the things that's pushing this forward further as well is a thing called progressive web apps, which is a way of coding your web page so that it can be very app-like. So on Android in particular, you now get the option that you can just add this straight to your home screen like it is an application. And a couple of the vendors like Android are looking at doing it so you can list a web page inside the App Store. So then potentially you don't have to get bogged down in deep, complicated coding with building your mobile app when you can build it entirely as a mobile website. And then finally, cars, very important for radio listening, huge contributor to radio listening hours. There is a system called radio DNS, which is a way of standardizing a technique called hybrid radio. Basically, hybrid radio is a way of being able to build a radio device in a car or on a desktop that can use both the internet and normal broadcast radio. And radio DNS defines a technology where you can look up the information that the radio receives over RDS or over DAB and find an address from that to go and contact a server on the internet. And then that means that you can focus on delivering really good quality audio over broadcast, but use the internet to provide visuals, EPG information, and a cool feature, particularly in cars, is that it can locate your internet stream so that whilst you're in a transmission area, you're listening over FM and DAB. As soon as you drive out of that area and the reception falls off, it can flip over to internet streaming and continue. So a local station can be received anywhere in the world that you can drive to. And then just to summarize, that you can see that a lot of this now is getting into the software realm, into coding. There'll be a coding session this afternoon, which I'll be doing. And I just encourage you to even if coding seems completely bewildering and magic, get involved, get playing with it, get tinkering with stuff. It's fun and you can do lots of cool stuff with it. Thank you.
So if you did want to get into coding and that kind of thing, would you recommend things like GA courses, or like where would you go if you wanted that coding to move into online radio?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. Obviously, you can do it academically, looking in your local area for code clubs, those kind of things, where they'll start at the absolute basics. Alternatively, you can do a lot of self-taught stuff online as well. There are a lot of good resources for getting started and just picking things up. The way I first started in it was completely self-taught. Things like websites, you can view the source of code of a website and play with it, break it, see what changing the code does and kind of learn from there. So lots of different ways into it.
I want to find out about the coding. Could there be a time where there could be a coding system where when the music is aired on air, when the music is played on air, or when an advert is played, a coding system could showcase the advert coming through on these hybrid radio? This very much on the cars.
Yeah. So.
Thank you.
Radio DNS has a slideshow system in it, which allows you to send a visual at the same time as the audio. And so when that advert comes on or when that song comes on, you can show a visual at the same time on the screen to reflect that. DAB also has a technology in it that can do that as well. The technology is out there. It's getting broadcasters to adopt it and start using it.
Right, and are all the car companies, embracing it, or is certain cars that are embracing the advertising or that feature in their cars? And is it in the UK or only in America?
It's probably more in Europe than it is in America at the moment. What we often see with a lot of the new technologies is that the very high-end luxury car companies develop it first, and then it trickles down through models, because there's only 2 or 3 car manufacturers that have all the different brands, so like Ford and lots of other kind of sub-brands. Audi in particular have done a lot of work in the connected car. They do this slideshow as one of their options, and a few other manufacturers have got it as well. So it is coming into cars, yeah.
During my first year degree this year, we did a lot with Jaguar Land Rover about connected cars. And one of the things that we did discuss was hybrid DAB and the slideshow system. And there was concerns raised about sort of safety aspects and distracting the driver. How, where's the responsibility lie with the broadcast industry on pushing this stuff into cars, or with manufacturers taking on this technology just because it's available and they want this super future-proof protected car? Where does it go? Yeah,
it's a really good question. So when the standards were initially developed, they weren't just thought about car, but also desktop and lots of other environments where slideshow might be more appropriate. But the safety concern is really important in automotive. And the way that Radio DNS handles that is that it's a membership body that has both automotive manufacturers in it and broadcasters in it to work together to define standards. I am aware of one of the auto manufacturers implementing a system where they connect to the feed that would show the slides, but they monitor the frequency that they're updating, and if they notice them over a threshold, they will actually suppress them. So yeah, it's tricky. It lies in two parts, because the broadcaster can abuse it, but the manufacturer can enforce certain rules on it.
It's also worth saying regulatory authorities are getting quite a lot into that kind of area. So, you know, people like the EU are just looking at things like, anyway, distraction in the car, because even your mapping app could potentially be quite distracting if it does something in a particularly bad way.
Perfect timing.